Former TNA World Champion Tessa Blanchard is back in the company. This comes after her being blackballed by nearly every major professional wrestling company in North America ever since allegations of bullying and racism emerged back in 2020. Tessa Blanchard at one point was one of, if not the fastest rising talent in any pro wrestling company. If you go back and look at her in 2019, 2020, she was dominating the wrestling scene and was a name to watch out for as AEW was emerging, as WWE was looking at TNA and other companies in order to sign talent. She was at the top of everyone's list, and as far as TNA goes, she was at the top of the world, achieving something that no other person in TNA, WWE, or AEW history has ever done, being a woman who held that company's World Heavyweight Championship. Not the Women's World Championship, but the one that the men hold, after defeating Sami Callihan in a match. And it was one of the most insane moments, but it was a moment that at the time was very well deserved, as Tessa Blanchard was indeed one of the best wrestlers on the scene in that day. However, all of this would change in January of 2020 when allegations of racism and bullying changed Blanchard's career forever. In January of 2020, several wrestlers accused her of making racist remarks and engaging in bullying, including wrestler Black Rose, who alleged that Blanchard had used the N-word against her during a backstage altercation in Japan back in 2017. This claim was actually corroborated even by other wrestlers such as Chelsea Green, Allison Kay, and Priscilla Kelly, and led to not only backlash amongst her colleagues, but backlash amongst fans. And one thing that did not help were other allegations that came out against Tessa Blanchard, including demonstrated a pattern of abusive and hostile behavior and was notorious for being difficult to work with. And the latter part of that actually cost her her job in TNA, as while all of this was going on, Blanchard was in Mexico during the COVID-19 pandemic, however refused to send pre-tape promos or return to defend her title, even when Impact Wrestling allegedly offered to cover her travel. This led to her being terminated and stripped of that historic world championship in June of 2020 after failing her contractual obligations, and sources within the company cited specifically that her unprofessionalism added to all of the friction that was going on. And this, plus the allegations of racism, which came out during a very sensitive time as the speaking out movement were holding a lot of wrestlers accountable for many of the horrible and disgusting things they had done in the past. And Blanchard's allegations against her of racism and abuse were no different in that regard. These allegations made any professional wrestling company hesitant to hire her. Promotions like AEW and WWE, which were really sensitive to public image and inclusivity, reportedly distanced themselves from signing her due to these controversies. And while efforts were made to try to repair her image through independent bookings and addressing the allegations head on, it has taken quite a while for her to get to the place where she was trusted by her colleagues. And that is key to all of this. It doesn't matter what you think is right or what you think about freedom of speech. The fact of the matter is, Tessa Blanchard broke a sacred rule of being a professional wrestler. And that is, she lost the trust of her colleagues. And once you lose the trust of your colleagues, it is something you have to work to get back. It is something that can't just be given back or can't just be ignored. These are people that you have to trust in the ring. These are people that you trust with your safety, with your lives in the ring. We have seen time and time again the pitfalls of professional wrestling. And even when you can trust someone in the ring, the dangers and the risk is so high that even an inch can change someone's life forever. So trust in professional wrestling, if you are a wrestler, is everything. However, as wrestler Black Rose, who actually was the one to open up and discuss the allegations of racism against Blanchard, Black Rose and others have said that they have moved on and even forgiven her as a way to just move on and get their own peace of mind in their careers. Despite this, many have also stood by these claims and emphasized that they spoke out to address systematic issues in professional wrestling rather than to hold a personal grudge against Blanchard. Despite all of this, it all led up to a moment at TNA Final Resolution 2024 where Tessa Blanchard returned and confronted former TNA Knockouts champion Jordynne Grace, attacking her, unveiling a mask, and getting booed out of the building as thousands upon thousands at home watched in shock. And it seems like Blanchard is indeed back in TNA, and she's essentially picking up where she left off. And through the character that she has portrayed in the one backstage segment that she was in, you can tell that part of this potentially is going to be leaning into the controversy, leaning into at least the allegations of her being a bully and her standing up for herself in that respect. And while I am not one to criticize storylines necessarily before I see them, I do think that TNA and Blanchard should be wary about how far they take such a thing. It is all fun and games until you take it over the line. And if they toe the line with some of the backstage bullying allegations, that's one thing. But leaning into the more controversial and racial aspects of her controversies, I don't think is a place where TNA wants to go. I don't think is a place where Tessa Blanchard wants to go. I don't think is a place that professional wrestling fans want this to go. TNA is as hot as they've ever been. They are on fire, and they have done a lot of work to rebuild the TNA brand, to rebuild their image, and to gain fan trust. And when you make a move like this, you are wagering some of that. And that does not mean that Blanchard is beyond forgiveness or beyond redemption. Every person has the capability of redemption. It is just about the way you carry yourself. And I think over the next couple of months, potentially years, the way that Blanchard carries herself backstage is going to speak a lot and is going to tell fans and her colleagues exactly what kind of person she is. And that will dictate how far she eventually goes, whether it's being signed by a company like AEW or WWE, or just being someone who makes it in TNA. Regardless, Tessa Blanchard is back, and it is going to be a hell of a ride, but I guess we'll see.